If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd rather just read about this than actually do it, you're not alone. The Enneagram 5 newsletter exists to help you move from knowing to experiencing. Every Saturday, you'll get insights designed to help fives grow without overwhelm. Sign up for free today at enneagram5.com/newsletter or visit the link in the description. Now on to the show.
So earlier I was talking to my mom and she asked me what we were recording about today.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh, it's nothing too heavy. We're just going to be talking about family dynamics. And she went, oh no.
Well, let's just jump right in then.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up as a 5 in your household, which is pretty much a household of 5s?
Yeah. Well, fives, and then my mom that was a 4 and, particularly, sensitive and average sensitive, really, probably, but we thought it was way too sensitive. And so, me and my brother, my dad, all 5s are all just like fully detached from reality all the time in our own heads and just doing our own things. And it was just a very common thing in our household for everybody to just be in their own rooms doing their own things and never talking to each other until like dinner time or something. And so I was conditioned from an early age to want to be in my room all the time by myself without anybody around. So that's number one. And so, yeah, I think that it kind of shows its face in that way in a few different ways. But I just remember very easily being like, my mom had she probably has a wing 5 though. She probably does. And she has like that ability to be really like not, she'll do things that are not very sensitive to other people's feelings or things, and so there is definitely a little bit of that going on where like our family as a unit was very 5 in many ways, and then from there you just get into kind of the weird, details. What is the word I'm thinking of? I don't know why I'm trying to say eccentricities.
Idiosyncrasies?
Idiosyncrasies?
Idiot secrecies.
Idiot secret C's. Yes, that's what it is. The secret C's. You got to watch out for them.
Oh, this is getting off to a great start.
Yeah. Yeah, all the different things, all the different parts of our character and the ways that my brother and I are very different from each other, even though we're both 5s. And, you get into a breakdown all of that and how that kind of works together. I'm sure things will come up as we go through this conversation. But that's the thing that sticks out to me right off the bat, just growing up, is just like we all had our own space and we loved that space. My dad had the garage when I was younger, very stereotypical of him. And then, and my mom had like the den where the computer was, and she used to work from home and did that kind of stuff. And then me and my brother had our own rooms. And yeah, for some dumb reason, when we were teenagers, we decided we wanted to share the den as a bedroom because we wanted it to be like a music room. And that ended up not being the greatest idea at all.
How long did that last?
Surprisingly, throughout the rest of our teen years, from when I was 16 through like probably 19, 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that?
Awful.
I would imagine.
Yeah, it was terrible. But, throughout a lot of my teen years, we were doing the same things. So, like, we were always rehearsing and practicing with friends, doing the band thing. And so it was easy to just kind of, like, we literally just threw 2 futons down there. So, like, when we weren't sleeping, they were couches and everybody just hung out in there. So, it's like we really just wanted a rehearsal space and we sacrificed bedroom to have that. And my mom was like, sure, I get an office and a guest room out of that. So that's how that happened upstairs.
Nice.
So then there was no turning back. And so the next time that we separated again, it was when my grandmother moved in, and they built on an entire half of the house, like another wing, essentially, of this small, normal suburban house. And it turned into an L-shaped house instead of just a normal house. And then I got a bedroom out of that because it was off of the den.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I lived with you, I lived in the den. And
You
your
lived in the
bedroom
den?
was right behind that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it was where you lived in that side of the den. That was our music space originally. It was that entire side. There were amps along the walls and stuff like that.
Oh, man. I just remember waking up at like 6 a.m. to that big-ass bird you had squawking at me.
In different voices.
Yes. Super creepy.
Yeah. Man, the best part was when you'd be going to bed and he'd go, night, night.
Oh, my God. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was so great. I loved that bird. I hope he's still alive somewhere. They lived to be like 72 or 74 or something.
What happened to him?
I don't know. My parents got rid of him.
Oh, okay, they just sold him or took him?
Yeah. I don't know how they do that. Like maybe that's very five of them in that way. I don't know. I could never get rid of my dogs, like I just couldn't even imagine it. It's like getting rid of a child, I just couldn't do it. My parents went through pets often. They would go through these phases where they get really obsessive about certain things and then they move on to the next thing. And then once that's over, I mean, there was a point where my parents used to have like 14 birds. There was a point where they had so many different, and they were all different kinds. Some of them were small and annoying. Some were like majestic and large. Like we used to have a gigantic red macaw. The bird was this big, and like the tail is this long. And my mom got really like obsessive about birds and really dug into that and learned how to like tame this bird that did not want to be touched. Every time she would take her beak the size of my palm and just hammer it into your arm, which was just her way of saying like get away. She wasn't like trying to bite through the bone or anything. She was just hammering really hard. And so me and my mom got into that for a while and tried to tame this bird. We had bruises all over our arms. And eventually,
what a hobby!
and then we did tame it, and I get to the point where like you could put her on the ground, and she would run from you screaming like a little girl, because they have their mimicking voices, and then you'd grab her tail and she'd flip over on her back and put her talons up in the air, and you'd rub her belly, and she'd laugh. So I think I've always had a thing about animals and taming them, I guess, and training them. But we should have been a circus. We should have took that show on the road. But then, yeah, birds either died or, I don't know, they just got rid of them. I don't know where they went. I have no idea where that African gray went. That was the one that always talked to you at night. I thought my parents would never let go of that bird. But I think
what
it just
was
got
his
to
name?
be Chiku.
Chiku.
Yeah, African for chatterer. We named him that in the beginning because we thought it was ironic because he never said anything or did anything. And then one day, he had been listening to us for years and suddenly just started talking.
What a five bird.
It's true. Even the animals were fives. It really went down to that like low level, subatomic. Yeah, but it was, we definitely had a strange household. Anybody that knew us definitely thought that the way we did things was strange, and then my parents just willing to up and leave their life for months and take us around the country touring and playing music and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like, there's crazy stuff that in that way that definitely benefited me, and it probably wouldn't have happened in any other type of household. But my parents getting into our interests as much as we were in that way and wanting to support us, I think was nice. But they just love getting into new things. Like my dad, obviously more than my mom, because my mom was like, she likes to get into things, but she'll stick with something for a very long time and like try to be really good at it. My dad, like, really got into candles and then got really good at making candles. And that was like his hobby for a while. And then he just kind of quit and stopped doing that. Went on to other things. He's trying to do like wood turning and trying to get into that. Like it's just always a new project. And so that was always, I guess, pretty normal in our household, was people just kind of picking things up and trying them and learning them and diving so far into them that you get lost. Like my mom would have to make sure and ask me if I had eaten for days.
Yeah. After
I would get into music, and like especially like when I was in my very beginning stages of trying to learn how to do music engineering on a digital recorder, those old Korg digital recorders, and I would actually forget to sleep and eat for days. And so it was just like, oh man, I should probably eat something. I feel kind of lightheaded, and I realized, oh, last time I ate something was like, 36 hours ago, so, and I still have a lot of that in me now. But you have to like regulate it, it's not the same, obviously, but I do still love having my own space and love getting lost in here for hours. I have to remember that I can't do it like I did when I was a kid, though. Those glory days are gone.
Yeah.
I had a great experience growing up as a five. I had kind of, the traditional intact family. I am a five. I think my brother is a six, but with a five wing. And so our family dinners were highly argumentative, but in a good way. It was like robust intellectual discussions. My dad would always say like, it sounds like we've solved all the world's problems. I still carry on that dynamic with him. Like when I meet with him for breakfast or lunch, that's kind of like how we relate, is through like intellectual banter, you could say. It kind of scared my wife when we were first dating, and she was kind of meeting my family and interacting with us, that she grew up not in that kind of situation at all. So she was very taken aback at like how like argumentative we were and like feisty we were. And it took a while to like, get her head around that. So I thought that was just, fun and interesting. I'm like that with my brother. We'll try to hash things out, get to the bottom of things. We're just had kind of a family value or virtue of like, we're not going to let the truth just like hide underneath, or we're not going to like be willfully ignorant of things or like beating around the bush. There wasn't a lot of that. And so those are kind of values I continue on in our current family dynamic. I'm now, 30s with kids and married. So we have kind of continued that tradition, as it were. And find that is it's a way that I can relate and feel intimate with somebody, actually, is to have like a good kind of verbal sparring session intellectually, kind of go at it and kind of debate, kind of like get to the root of a thing, like get to what's going on, what's really going on here, take it apart, view it from all angles. That just really is what gets me like energized relationally.
I had an interesting upbringing as well, fairly atypical, I think. So I think we've talked about this before. I have two brothers and two sisters, and I think and I'm the oldest boy, and then I have an older sister and a younger sister and two younger brothers. And I think my dad's probably a five. Yeah. And then my brother right below me is probably a five. But then the rest, we've got mixes of some other personalities. I think we got maybe a couple of sixes or a 9 in there, and a 7 or 2, not a 2, but a 7, and a couple of 7s probably.
You think your other brother is a 7?
Actually, he might be a 4.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had like that artist side of him and stuff too.
So I could, I could see that, but I'm not going to try to type my family, but
That's fair. I was just curious.
Yeah. I'm not really sure, but there's definitely a mix. But I will say that the upbringing we had, which was very conservative, that kind of traditional dad is the man of the house, he rules the roost. My dad's personality definitely dominated the household. Like he kind of set most of the rules, which wasn't always great. Yeah. I'm realizing now. Sure. I remember after Amy and I started dating, I was over at her parents' house, and my brother was in town, and he came over, and I think she or her mom made us some food, and he and I sat down next to each other and just head down started shoveling it in and didn't talk, didn't make like even eye contact with anyone. Mm-hmm. And she was like, okay, so it's not just you. It must be like your family thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, I've never seen anyone just like head down, not talk, eat food, right?
Like you're in prison.
Yeah, like I'm in a prison.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I hadn't really thought about this before, but my dad had a rule, no talking at the dinner table.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What a weird rule.
Yeah. So we just sat in silence most of the time.
Why even be at a dinner table?
I know. Well, we kind of just stopped. That was the thing. Yeah. It's like we didn't do a lot as a family unit, especially as I got older. it was kind of like living in a hotel in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah.
Just kind of came and went. My mom would make dinner and we would all come and like grab a plate and then take it back to our respective rooms. And it wasn't all the time, but it was mostly like that. I think that was kind of the norm.
Yeah.
And,
I think it was the same with me too.
Yeah.
I think that's what we did.
Yeah. And I always found myself in the basement, no matter, because we moved a lot. And it was because, so up until about, I think like 8, I had to share a room with my 2 younger brothers. And until we moved into a house that had a basement, like a separate living space. And for some reason, I just always ended up in the basement because I just didn't want to be around anyone.
That carried on until you lived with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a theme in my life.
Yeah.
I finally got out of the basement.
I was like, good. Your house now doesn't have a basement. So.
But that was it's almost like my dungeon. I would just always go down to my room and I was either watching TV or playing with Hot Wheels or something like that, reading. I read Animorphs a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Those were awesome.
Yep. I remember those.
And I love the idea
Wasn't that a show too?
They try to make it a show on Nickelodeon. It did not last very long.
Yeah. Sad.
Yeah. I love the idea of being able to just transform into any animal and
Sure. Yeah.
experience a different existence and also have the freedom to escape or the freedom to observe unnoticed and just different things like that. I love those books.
It was a little why I liked Marvel so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another world to get lost in.
Yeah.
Where you also get to be special and have your own special abilities that nobody else has.
Yeah. Yeah. But needless to say, I did not get along with my siblings well at all. I've been thinking about this a lot lately just because my oldest, he has a pretty sensitive nervous system. And it takes me back. Like, it gives me flashbacks because I think that I don't experience things in the same way. I think because my senses have dulled, but when he has certain experiences that I observe, and it takes me back to remember, like, oh, I was that way too. I just had this really sensitive nervous system, and it was like almost like I couldn't stand to be in physical space with people. Like, even if we weren't doing anything, it was like almost like they were vibrating at a frequency that I couldn't deal with.
Yeah.
And so my siblings always irritated me really easily. I got really angry really easily. I'm realizing too, a lot of that, having been in therapy for the last few months now, I'm realizing that a lot of that is also trauma.
Sure.
And so I don't really know how to divide or how to discern between those things. Like what was dynamics and what was like the trauma response from certain things I experienced as a kid. And so, I don't know, but I spent a lot of time alone. I spent a lot of time in the dark, watching TV, playing video games, and just generally feeling like I had no one in my life that wanted to connect with me or that I could connect with.
Yeah, that is dark. That is rough.
Yeah.
It's like it's what every 5 thinks they want. It's like,
right.
It's that like, it's like there's, did you ever see that show Tales from the Loop?
I don't think so. No.
It's like it's a really great short mini series where every episode was about a different character in the town, but this town was doing in the middle. They had this place called the Loop, and they experimented on all these different things, and they were like coming up. It's supposed to be back in like the 60s or 70s, but they were coming up with these crazy futuristic things that we don't even have now. So it was like this whole idea that they had like stuff going on in there, and every once in a while something would get out of this place, the Loop, and one of the characters would either come across it or they'd find it somehow, and it would do something crazy. And it was always like anecdotal in the way that the episode would like a little like, it was like a lighthearted Black Mirror, it's like it would tackle
a gray mirror.
It was a gray mirror. Slightly opaque mirror where like it would it would target, you'd get to know this character just enough to know their flaws or like something that they maybe worried about too much or like focused on, and then they would come across this thing and this thing would exploit that. And at first it's really cool, and then it like very quickly becomes like, there was one time where a couple found this machine that stopped time, and they realized, and they were in high school, and they realized that they could stop time and escape out of the world for as long as they wanted to. And so they literally spent an entire lifetime in one moment, and they stayed there so long, and then they finally decided we have to come back. And so they come back at the end of the episode, and it's like nothing changed, but they literally have lived years in this one moment together and have had a whole lifetime together. As this high school couple is now like an old couple in young bodies because they didn't age or anything. And so they come back, and like that weird like contrast of coming back to that. I mean, it's like stuff that like really makes you think. That's kind of how your life was. It was like, it was like a Fives like dream, but then you're stuck there, and it becomes darker and more too much solitude and. Yeah. It's like the dream that becomes a nightmare because it doesn't actually feed any of the good parts of yourself.
Yeah. And
not to like just whole on dog on your life. If any of his family is listening, I love you. I'm sorry.
I love you too. I have no ill feelings towards any of my family.
Yeah, same.
And honestly, like that's a huge miracle just because of how angry I was, especially at my parents for a long time.
Yeah.
And, I went through that process of grieving and forgiving and then empathizing with a lot of things. It's kind of trite, but becoming a parent yourself really does help you have a lot of grace for your parents.
Yeah.
Everybody is responsible for their choices, obviously. But I can at least understand how they made the choices that they made.
Sure.
And can appreciate what they were trying to accomplish and what they were trying to achieve and what they were trying to do for us and the life they wanted for us. And they were good parts and they were bad parts, and that's just kind of how it goes.
Well, and even without like the experience of having kids, I feel like you also, as you just get older and you realize how human your parents actually are, and your that relationship changes and and you start seeing your parents as human beings and realizing like we're all just carrying the shit that we got handed to us onto the next people that are around, Right,
because even if you don't have kids, you in your current position can think about what it would be like to be told that you were going to have a kid. And all the shit you're currently dealing with, and that doesn't just magically go away. Right,
exactly. It magnifies it, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. It shines a big fucking light on it and a mirror. And that's an episode into itself. But we also moved around a lot. And I think that was another part of me feeling disconnected because I was only in a place for a year or two most of the time after I was like 7. And by the time I just started kind of settling in and finding my groove a little bit and maybe making some friends, it's like, we're moving somewhere else. And so that made me really adaptable. And it also gave me some skills around observing people and noticing patterns and kind of becoming a chameleon in that regard.
Yeah.
And learning how to blend into new groups fairly quickly.
Right.
Because I've had to just by means of survival.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
And so I think that also plays into a lot. And like the other thing too is we were homeschooled. I was homeschooled till 7th grade. And because like that coupled with moving a lot, and we usually lived in small towns, it was just really hard to have any sense of community or connection or make friends really easily. And so then you take that and kind of couple it with the fact we can't eat at the dinner, or we can't talk at the dinner table.
Right.
And we, my dad was also pretty angry a lot and I'm sure exhausted. I mean, they moved from West Virginia to Georgia with like $80 to their name.
Wow.
And he, worked his way up from nothing basically. And so, but I'm sure those early years especially were super stressful.
Yeah.
There were times where I'm sure they were wondering how to put food on the table. And
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And when you're in survival mode like that, it takes your sort of native characteristics and just amplifies the worst ones a lot of the time. And so I think that was a big part of like my dad not like setting up an environment that wasn't very conducive to connection. And I think a lot of it is because he didn't know how to connect to himself.
Sure.
Or to us. And he was just in survival mode all the time. And he needed to be able to, probably for him, he was connecting with us by sitting at the table with us.
Yeah.
That was the best he could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, I can't handle conversation. Like, I'm not in that space. So, like, we're just not going to do it. And this is as much as I have to give. I mean, yeah, that's when you were saying it, that's kind of what I thought is like, you know, it's so easy for me to nowadays get to that place where like mentally that's the first thing I think is like not what they're doing but why, and and trying to give a little grace in that way that people just sometimes don't know how to cope with different life situations.
Yeah, totally. He, as we kind of got older and we did more stuff together as a family and we started getting along as siblings, which didn't happen until like my 20s, really.
Yeah.
Mostly my fault. And he still would just, we would have family events and stuff, and he would hang out just for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden he just disappears, and he doesn't come back out, and he's gone into his home office and working on something, doing something. He would just leave. And I had a really hard time with that because I always took it as he didn't care enough about me to spend time with me. And that was kind of always how I interpreted it growing up. Like my dad, the story that I had was my dad was a workaholic. He cared more about work than he cared about me. And, so he spent that time working and not spending time with me.
Yeah.
And, I know how easy it is to kind of fall into that trap.
Sure.
And I've had to do a lot to kind of pull myself back out from that as a dad. I will say, though, that he changed significantly around 2016 because he got cancer. And he should be dead, honestly. He had stage 4 skin cancer. And I don't know how he's alive, but he got through it. And he had a real hard time for a year or two, like real bad. And I remember when it first started getting really bad, it was around the time that my first son was born. And we sat down at Pinewood Social, actually.
Oh, wow.
This is where I was living right next to that in Nashville. And we got one of those private like rooms with the curtain and had lunch or dinner or something. And I'd just been doing therapy for like 6 months, and I got to the point where I was ready to talk to my dad and basically told him how I felt about how we grew up and how I felt like I didn't know him at all, like and he doesn't know me.
Yeah.
And I was like, basically, if that's how you want it, I honestly am okay with that. But I'm not going to pretend like we have a relationship when we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of like rolled his eyes and gave me like kind of a gasp thing. And I pretty much started grieving my dad at that point, where it's like I was writing his eulogy in my head.
Yeah.
And I was prepared to like not have him in my life, whether it happened by his choice or not. It seemed like that's what was going to happen. And then he got really sick. And he realized, I think it was partially that conversation and partially like him facing down his own death. He realized what really mattered, and he started talking about that. And he started talking about how all that matters is like spending time with us and, all this stuff. And I didn't know how much I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
And just him acknowledging that opened up a lot. And I remember when he got really sick, it was when the first time I ever really saw him as a human.
Yeah.
And he was always this like cold, distant robot to me. And I didn't even know if I mattered to him. That's how I felt. And when all of that changed, I think I started to let go of my own needs. I think that there was a part of me that resented him. And so the other parts of me that were like him, and both good and bad, like I didn't even want to acknowledge them. And when we started to actually connect with each other for the first time in my life, which was like in my early 30s,
Yeah. Right.
I started to open myself up to those other parts of me too. And realizing how much I had separated, disassociated. And then since then, it's been like a journey of getting to know those parts.
I was growing up as the only child, had a converted attic as a room. Never really had any deep conversations with my parents, not into my late 30s anyway. Right now, pretty much everyone is dead, apart from my mother, whom I phone now and again, and because she still stays in my country of origin, visit once a year or so. So no, not very close. On the other hand, I connected recently with my half-sister who stays in yet another country. Don't know why I was never close with my family. Could it be my five-ish detachment and not wanting to open and share? Suppose it could.
Kind of leads into one of the other things I wanted to bring up, because as I mentioned, I've been in therapy for the last few months after not having gone for 5, 6, 7 years now, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
It's been a while. And my new therapist uses a framework called internal family systems. And so when we were thinking about this episode and what we wanted to talk about, I think initially we were saying like siblings or something like that, but we sort of broadened it to family dynamics. And the first thing that came to mind was internal family systems. Because when I think family, I'm learning that that's a pattern, and that pattern can be found at different scales. And so there's the family that we know, but then there's also a family internally, where you've split yourself up into all these different parts, and those parts have the same kind of dynamics that a family with moms and dads and brothers and sisters would have, and then a lot of the way that those parts, I think, form are shaped by the family that you had. And so it's just, I don't think we can talk about family dynamics without like talking about that framework a bit, because it's helped me a lot in getting to know myself. And the basic premise behind it is, I'll just pull up Chat GPT here.
There you go.
Because I couldn't remember all the terms. But the idea behind it is that we have all these sort of sub-personalities that we develop, often in response to traumas. And there are different types. So there's the exiles. And so these parts carry the trauma, pain, and fear. They are often suppressed to protect the individual.
Yeah.
And then there are the managers. These parts try to keep the individual safe by being proactive and protective. They manage the individual's life in such a way as to avoid triggering or upsetting the exiles.
Huh.
And then there are the firefighters. These parts react when an exile is activated. They tend to be impulsive and work to distract or soothe the individual from the pain. And I was skeptical at first on this. I'm like, I have an open mind. I'll try it.
Sure.
It ended up being really helpful. And he combines it with EMDR. And so basically I sit there holding these like plastic paddle things in my hands, and they vibrate from left to right. And it's supposed to help. We don't actually know how the EMDR works, but it actually works really well. And it helps with
it's like a focus thing.
PTSD. So there's a sort of hypothesis that the rapid eye movement that we experience in sleep and in certain other things helps us process traumas and process memories. And that's why we do it at night. And so if I remember correctly, the story behind this is there was a scientist who was walking through the woods and noticed how walking through the woods helped them feel better, and because they were darting their eyes from tree to tree and stuff like that, and they wondered if that was a part of it, and so then they tested, and so then they developed this technique for it, and then they started testing it with like people who had extreme PTSD and things like that, and they were able to significantly reduce their response, like trauma response and stuff over time.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So basically, and so you're supposed to, like, the original version works with your eyes, but I guess it's not only with your eyes. It has something to do with like syncing the different hemispheres of your brain, I guess.
Yeah. So then it becomes your focus is what it is. It's like focusing on
I don't know. It's almost like creating a rhythm from each hemisphere or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend to know how this works, but it definitely helps. And we walk through those different parts of myself, and it's really interesting when it allows you to sort of step out and become the observer and detach, which is really nice as a 5. I appreciated that part.
Yeah, definitely.
And then what happens is you identify these different parts that are often like warring with each other, and you name them, and then you basically try to get to know them and understand them, and see where they're coming from. And then as you're getting to know each one, then you figure out how to mediate between them. And so you start having this negotiation between these parts, and then you start helping the other parts. And so it's almost like you're being like a therapist to yourself.
Yeah.
But and my therapist just kind of guides me, and it's just asking me questions and to help me focus on the different parts and like what comes up when I think about them. And man, I feel like I've experienced so much healing in this past 6 months from different conversations that I've had with Amy, and then also going to therapy and doing this work. But I'm realizing how much of being a 5 is, it's not a singular thing, you know. It's not like, because we're not a singular being, you know. We're made up of all these collective intelligences, and
sure.
And so, and yet somehow we have this sort of singular being experience, which is really weird if you think about it for too long, which I try not to do, but often do. And to really get to know ourselves as 5s and understand ourselves better, I think is a helpful framework to identify those different parts of our 5-ness, if you want to use that sort of lens. Sure.
Yeah. Well, what'd you find out?
Oh boy, we're getting real deep in it then.
I mean, you know, if we're going to bring it up, how would we not?
I know.
I haven't done it, so I don't have anything to say.
So my first big session one of the things that came out was my inner Peter Pan kind of my inner responsible dad, and the dynamic between those two things. And where this came from was like my habits of procrastinating even on some important things, and my habits, like we talked about, that had gotten really bad earlier this year around just distracting myself with like YouTube or Twitter or things like that. And what was behind those? Why were those coming up? And it was this part of me that is trying to basically distract me from anxiety and feeling unsafe, which is a response to trauma as a kid that I experienced. And so that part of me, because I have this other part, which is the manager, which is the responsible dad. It's basically the plot from the movie Hook, right? I am constantly shaming that part of myself and trying to, asking it questions like, why don't you care enough about your kids to focus? Or why don't you, and to connect and to not distract yourself? Why can't you get anything done? Just different things like that. And in that dynamic, basically then it's suppressing the term that they use was exile, right? That Peter Pan. But the thing is, like, it doesn't stay suppressed. It pops up in different, like, unhealthy ways. And those were the times when it was like pulling me to, go down a YouTube rabbit hole or watch 4 hours straight of conspiracy theories videos, at 2 a.m. and just things like that. And
that's like just escapism.
Yeah.
It's like your own versions of that.
Yeah. But what I realized and honestly, my sort of conscious view of that part of myself really came from like the responsible dad's viewpoint of, I need you to go away so that I can provide for my family, so that I can accomplish things, so that I can realize goals and stuff like that. And then I realized when we were going through this process and I started to get to know the Peter Pan, that like the reason Peter Pan kind of came out was to help protect me. And what he really represents, though, is my passion, my creativity, my inner child, my playfulness, the things that enable me and empower me to create art, to love, to cook, to dance, all of these things, these rich experiences. I have been suppressing those, and so it's been coming out in unhelpful ways. And then I got to know the responsible dad part a little bit, and understanding like what it was actually trying to achieve. It wasn't trying to suppress the Peter Pan. It was trying to have Peter Pan gain some perspective to understand that play needs to be balanced. And in doing so became too overbearing and went to the other end and just sort of squashed my passion for life. But then like understanding that each of them came from a good place of wanting to help me and good intentions, and they've just gotten out of balance. And so then I started to kind of mediate between them and helping the Peter Pan part to feel seen and heard, and helping my responsible dad to know how to address that part, and to also to make room for it to express itself in a way that is beneficial to me, and just finding little ways. And so actually some of the changes that I've made from this specific session was I started growing out my hair. And I know that it's like, it seems like such a simple thing, but the way that my hair always was, I always had huge anxiety about my hair. I think part of it was, when I started going to public school is when that happened. And
that makes sense.
Because I was looking around and seeing like, okay, what are the hairstyles? Which most popular kids have the most popular hairstyle? And I'm like analyzing the shape of it and and then trying to like map it mentally onto the shape of my head, and then trying to figure out how to explain to my mom, who was a hairstylist. So she always did my hair. I tried to explain to her how I wanted my hair, and then I would just sit down, and she from my perspective, she never got it right because I didn't know how to tell her what I wanted, and also I didn't have realistic expectations of what I thought my hair was going to make me look like someone other than myself, I guess. And so I would just sit in this chair for 45 minutes while my mom cut my hair, and my palms were sweating, like my whole body I was just like full anxiety sweats. And then if it wasn't like absolutely perfect, I would just get so angry and I'd be so upset all night. And so like I never knew really what to do with my hair. Sure. And I just had like a normal teenage boy haircut. Like it wasn't, wasn't anything special. But I obsessed over that kind of stuff. Not because of the looks themselves, but because I thought that if I had the right haircut in just the right way, that then I could have friends. If I dress just the right way.
Right, there's some formula to it.
There's some formula to it.
Yeah, okay.
And if I kind of do the right equation, I'll get the answer that I want. And so then when I became a dad, I finally, when I moved out, like in my 20s, and I had started having other people cut my hair, I'm like, oh, okay, I understand now. and like I understand what I need to do to tell you what I need, and
Right.
and also I should go to a barber, not a stylist, and just different things like that.
Yeah.
You know, and then I
say this all. I love that we're talking about hair.
I know.
I don't have any.
You don't worry about any of this.
Here's the thing. This is a little bit applicable to my life in a
You
weird
can't
way.
empathize with me at all.
Well, I can, because when I had hair, I loved having hair. And here's the thing with that, though, just a little side note here is I miss having hair so much, but more than anything, I hate shaving my head because I don't like the way it feels. I don't like the way my head feels when it's fully shaven, but it's really the only way that it looks good. And if you remember last year, I grew my hair back out.
Yeah, what happened to that?
Totally worked. Then I was just like, I don't know. I felt like it was still too thin right here, and I did not want to be that guy, even though it was probably fine.
It looked good.
But now I'm taking this insecurity I have about not having hair / having hair that doesn't look like it does, and I'm taking it into experimental mode. So I'm using all of those things that regrow hair right here, because now I just want to know if it works. So obviously I haven't been doing it long enough to know, but I also am not really shaving my head. So like
Okay.
I'm just looking a little dirtier.
Yeah.
But I'm just having to get over it and just realize that's just what it looks like. And it also doesn't look as bad as I think it does. But I have the same weird like hair things as you do, but it's just not obvious in my life right now. But I might have hair again. I want to try.
You should,
because most of my head can still grow hair. Just this what I used to call as like a little peninsula turned into more of like an inlet.
Archipelago.
It's an inlet. It's a little swimming hole now.
Nice. Oh,
But yeah, maybe I can fill it with water once again, or no, with land rather. It's got plenty of water. Where have we gone with this analogy?
I know. So when I found out I was going to be a dad when I was 29, I obviously started researching.
Right, of course.
Then so I started looking up stuff about being a dad and stuff, and somehow that led me to get fed by the algorithm like different man type videos.
Oh,
right,
for sure, yeah.
But one of them was how to build a capsule wardrobe. And
capsule wardrobe.
Yeah, because not only did I never know what to do with my hair, I never knew how to dress.
Oh, I think I'm about to start speaking my language.
And it never made sense to me. Like I would go to the store and I would try to put things together. I'm like, I don't understand. Like what? I couldn't intuitively put together a decent looking outfit or like even know.
Yeah, for sure.
I think part of it had to do with I wasn't comfortable with the sort of style of clothing that actually fit my body the way it's supposed to.
Right. And then you never look right in it.
So then like I end up with stuff that's too baggy. So which makes like throws. I know all this now, but
that's back in now apparently. Baggy clothes.
God, don't get me started. So I can't. But the other part of it too was, as I started to learn, like, okay, there are some things to do, but I don't really want to like spend hundreds of dollars a month on clothing just to kind of stay in fashion or whatever. And it always just seemed like way too much work. And then I just stumbled across this idea of a capsule wardrobe. And so the idea behind it is you buy timeless pieces as a foundation, and you buy or as just like your whole wardrobe, and everything should be able to match with everything else.
Yes.
And so you can walk into your closet blindfolded, pick a shirt, pick pants, and they go together.
Yep.
And when I heard this idea, this was like 2016. I was like, holy shit, this sounds amazing. It's a system.
Yeah.
And I love systems.
Right.
And so I started, we're having a baby, so money was tight, but I started trying to figure out like how to kind of add one piece at a time and build up this capsule wardrobe.
Yeah.
But in doing that, I was like, hey, well, now I'm dressing a little better, but now I have a shit hair still. So what do I do about that? So then I started researching hair, and that's when I started going to a barber instead of a stylist.
Right.
And I realized what I actually wanted based off of what was with this style that I had, which was, I now know responsible dad style. And because that's what I was trying to form. I was like, who am I as a dad?
Sure.
And I wasn't thinking this consciously, but this is how it ended up. I was making all these decisions of like asking the question, like, what would it be like if I'm a dad? Like, what do I need to be like? What do I need to dress like, look like, and all this stuff?
Interesting. Like building a character.
Yeah. And that is basically what dominated my life or my persona up until 2020 when I got so stressed and like gained 40 pounds in 9 months, and then nothing fit me. So then I went back to like just, piecing things together, because I'd always tell myself, well, I don't want to invest too much in clothes right now because I'm going to lose this weight.
Right.
All right.
Right.
And then,
of course.
So anyway, that's probably way too much information. But the whole point that I'm trying to get to is like there's this part of myself that was suppressed in that process.
Right.
And I always really actually hated my hair because I have these cowlicks, and then when I finally figured out like what to do about them. But it required me to blow dry my hair in order to, so I would have to like shower, wash my hair, and blow dry every day. And then I put this to like get the cowlicks out, and then I have to put this stuff in it because my hair gets frizzy if I blow dry it. And like this whole thing, right? It's so stupid.
Quickly becoming a hair episode.
It really is.
I just had this like outside of myself moment while you were talking. I was like, are we still talking about this?
And you can go to hair.com/Enneagram 5. Pick up the product that Josiah uses. So anyway.
20% off. Use E5 season 4. It's the checkout.
So anyway, I'll be done talking about my hair in a second. But
still not done.
Well, I know I'm not. I'm trying to get through this.
Okay,
man.
I'm sorry. Go.
The point that I'm making is I started to ask questions about how I could help this Peter Pan part express himself and give him more room to do that and to feel like himself and feel like he's not, he shouldn't be shamed and things like that.
Yeah.
And what came out of that was growing my hair out. And so I went to a new barber and told him what I wanted to do. And so he basically like shaped my hair up a bit and was like, you kind of just, you got to go through, because the other thing, God damn it, I can't. I'm still talking about my hair. Why is this taking so long?
I don't know. I'm thinking about how much I have to edit later just to make this like not an entire episode about hair.
I'm just gonna keep going, man.
Yeah, just push through.
All right.
Hopefully we're nearing the end. And all part of a conversation. This isn't even a two-way street because I can only talk about hair so much.
Oh God, we should leave this in. Actually,
Yeah, I'm going to.
Okay, so back to my hair. Oh no. I went to the barber, told him I wanted to grow it out.
Yeah.
And so then and I also have more oily hair. And so, basically I was like, I want a long hair, but I also like don't want to have to wash it every day and have it still look decent and stuff. He's like, so he's asked me questions. I can't get through this. He's asking me questions about my shampoo and my conditioner.
And what products did you use? What did he recommend?
Well, if you go to hair.com. Okay. And so anyway, he told me that I should only be washing my hair every 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
And that was using the wrong shampoos and all that stuff.
Right.
And I was like, well, if I dry it, then it gets all frizzy. He said not to put product in it. And so I was like, but if I don't dry it, then I get the cowlicks. He's like, lean into the cowlicks, man. I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm like, I'll try it. And it was like, felt weird at first, but within a few days, it was like, there was that part of me felt seen. And it was just expressing itself, and it felt really good.
Yeah.
And like, I've been letting my hair go crazy, just like do whatever it does. And I love it. Like it feels so freeing. And I don't like, I just rinse off in the shower and wet my hair and then get out and let it dry. And I've never been able to do that. And so like, I don't have to, like, getting ready is a lot easier because I don't have to think about any of that. And I just,
Sure.
like I I was, because I'm all about like as low maintenance as possible.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, like just not having to wash your
Yeah.
hair every day is like, it's when they tell you they don't really even need to take a shower for 2 to 3 days. And
Yeah,
it's like, man,
yeah.
so nice.
Yeah. But then since I changed my hair, I started to change my clothes again, and I started wearing more things that I was comfortable in, kind of more casual type stuff, and not feeling like I had to be this professional guy.
Right.
And so it just like wholesale did this whole change, and then shortly after that I went to a show and for the first time in 10 years, and it was amazing. And I realized that I wanted to be back up on stage and play music again. And so I, by the time I gotten home, I'd already written most of a song. And I went and a couple weeks later bought this really sweet Telecaster. It's a American Vintage 2 63 replica. It's so nice. I love playing it so much. And like all of this was just in a span of like a few weeks. And I just, there's this like, I felt this passion and creativity just start pouring forth because I made some small changes that helped this part of me feel seen and express itself. And I feel like a different person because I'm connecting with myself, and I'm learning how to integrate those parts of myself that I've been kind of separating and putting in boxes.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing how much of the work that I've been doing is, for lack of a better word, like spiritual work in myself. And I'm really, I think that this is another lens to view integration with the Enneagram and moving up the levels of development.
Sure.
Because it's definitely helping me do that.
Wow. I mean, that's definitely a good thing to take away from this conversation, I guess. Yeah, let those things be heard. I definitely noticed as someone who wasn't very loud about it, but obviously cared a lot about. Now I'm talking about your hair. It's contagious. Your hair. But seriously, when I saw you, and I was like, what the hell's happened to Josiah? He's not doing anything to his hair? Like, I immediately noticed. I was like, oh, that's definitely something different. But and then, of course, a lot of other things have changed, too. So, I think it's so, yeah, go to therapy, grow your hair out. Don't put anything in it or wash it. And you'll feel so free and creativity.
And join the community where I detail all of the products that I use.
You have a whole page dedicated to Josiah's hair now.
Which only has shampoo and conditioner on it because I don't put anything in it.
There's a whole process. We could go through the different levels of your hair, like different pictures. We go back in pictures. And
I mean, we're still talking about
Okay. This point, I've kind of embraced it.
So growing up with my family as a 5, I had 4 siblings, and at different points, all of us were homeschooled. So most of our community was kind of each other or the people who were at our church, which I went to a pretty small church. So I think, I was okay with that. I mean, as a 5, I was fine being by myself. I spent a lot of time just in my room, kind of listening to music or playing with Legos or reading, and was pretty introverted. So I don't think it bothered me that I didn't have like a huge friend group, or that I wasn't, it didn't really even occur to me that, I didn't have a ton of friends, because my community was my siblings and the people at our church. So we're still, I'd say, relatively close now. We're all married. 4 of the 5 of us are married and have kids. So we don't see each other as much, but I think we're all on good terms. And when we do get together, we enjoy each other's company. We all have different personalities, but I think we all, have that kind of shared history together. And so that kind of keeps us close.
I know that there's different aspects in which my family's dynamics have impacted me and I still carry with me. And I've gone through kind of my own version of seeing them as human and seeing the different things that they did and how that impacted me. And continually, to my mom's surprise, I'm not talking, I don't think negatively about her or about any of those things. And much of her fear of this episode, probably. So I'm just going on and talk about how she's a bad mom.
Well, which is like, that's a huge thing for you. And, even when we first started the podcast, it was a lot harder for you to talk about your relationship with your mom specifically, than it is now. And so I've seen just in the last, few seasons, that how much growth and healing has happened there.
For sure, yeah. I mean, we started this podcast, my relationship with my mom was in a different place than it is now, and a lot of that has just come with just being adults together instead of being like, I read something the other day about how a lot of times the friction that happens between parents and children when they're growing up and becoming adults is due to the fact that parents or children don't know how to stop having the provider and the provided relationship like that, where the parents are the provider. When you no longer need a provider, that becomes like, well, what do I do with these people now, in your brain? And so, and instinctually, and because you don't know how to relate to them. And when you don't need a provider, but you still feel like they're trying to provide, or you feel like that's the way you see them, then you don't know how to have a relationship with them either. And so I follow a lot of therapy Instagrams, and that was literally just a picture. And I was like, damn, it really hit me hard. That's a good way to look at it. But I think that was a lot of it too, is my parents, my mom especially, did not know how to not be a provider. And I mean, to some degree, they always will be, right? Like there's always things your parents can help you with. And it's just, but it's such a different relationship and a different dynamic. And it's crazy for the duality of childhood and the experiences you experienced and the things that we all went through as a unit, a family unit, and you guys too, right? Like that lives in this duality with your new relationship with your parents, that it somehow works and mingles together because of that growth with that relationship and the way that all kind of comes together. But I guess I'm still figuring it out a lot on how that all kind of works, and really just starting to go back through in my own brain about my childhood memories and the things that my parents did that impact me now in negative or positive ways. And yeah, I mean, we could have a part 2 of this. I probably have a lot more to say, but I think that because I think I'm just starting to really think about that and why I was excited to have this conversation, just to kind of poke at that surface a little bit and start thinking about it.
Hey man, we got all night.
Just by sunup, we'll be there. Where are those paddles? I don't ever want to be in a situation where you're my therapist.
Neither of us wants that, my friend. Right. We'd be talking about my hair for 20 minutes.
You'd be a terrible therapist. You'd be like the first therapist I went to. Oh man, so self-absorbed. Fuck. If a therapist talks about his hair for 20 minutes, like, come on. I'm not saying you can't do that, but as a therapist, you really shouldn't be doing that.
At least don't bill for those 20 minutes.
I'll give you a discount. Man, this episode's going to be great.
So I'm curious, now that you are of age and a family man of your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've been building a family with Madison.
Sure.
How do you think about family now? Like, what are you trying to create in this family?
Man, that's such a heavy question. I don't. In some ways, I have like this really clear idea of what I want, what I'm thinking, and then in other ways, it's like I literally have no idea because I'm constantly sabotaging myself a little bit. You know, one of the things when I was really young, my dad spent a lot of time with me, different from your dad. Like I remember him being very involved and always around, even when he was working all the time. Like I still have, fond memories of him being there at different times when it mattered. And then there was a point where we got older, able to take care of ourselves and whatever. And then my dad, who's always loved things like games and video games and stuff, just like, I think it was when World of Warcraft came out, and he got so sucked into that world that I think I didn't see him for about 10 years.
Dude, I remember when I would go over to your house. Like, where's your
yeah.
dad? Oh, he's playing World of Warcraft. Like, still?
Yeah, he was there sitting in the same spot 2 days ago.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he played all the time, and because of the nature of my house, no one ever tried to stop him.
Yeah.
You know, it just, oh, well, that's where Dad is. That's what's happening. I guess I'll go keep doing my own thing. So it wasn't as big of a deal. But I think in the long run, it definitely impacts me in the way that now, you know, I'm constantly having to check myself to make sure I'm not falling too much into something that I'm forgetting about those around me. Because and also because I don't have that situation. I didn't marry an Enneagram 5 or someone who is like that and wants to know their own space all the time either. I have married somebody who's the opposite and wants to coexist in my space all the time. And so it's definitely an adjustment in that way and trying to figure out kind of what that looks like in my life. And yeah, I don't know. It's such a strange thing because it's the most new thing to me, being with somebody that is so different from my family or so different from a lot of the other people that I've ever been with. And that dynamic is such a new thing for me even still to try to navigate and not just fall into areas where I'm an asshole or I'm, you know, I don't want to be that person. I know that much. I know that that's the identity. And of course, I also think that, you know, like my dad before had a hard shell and was quiet, and he still is like that. Like, to try to have him have one of my friends stay at his house before the wedding, and you know who I'm talking about. And this particular person loves to talk a lot and ask the deepest questions and get to the core of a human being in the first 5 minutes of a conversation. It's like it's a race. And my dad, he calls me after this person leaves, and he goes, and which was days after we'd all left, and he goes, man, he likes to talk. And he was like, I was like, yeah, he does. He really does. And he was like, but I mean, he's asking questions I've never thought about. He said he'd be sitting there asking me things, and I'd be like, well, so what do you think about that? I don't think anything about it. And I love my dad. I love that I know for a fact my dad has had these deep and intellectual conversations, but the only ones are thoughts, but the only ones that I know we've had conversations with is like science and like all the engineering and how things work. And but as he's gotten older, he's also gotten a lot softer. He's a big softie. He cries at all kinds of things and like loves children, and you know. And
it seems like your parents have, now that they've retired, they felt like they've had the freedom to kind of really connect with their inner child again.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's been insanely therapeutic for them and has only helped our relationship as a whole. And yeah, for sure. And it's also been really nice for me to kind of go back to that place and think about my own inner child, which is what I'm doing now with like, I've had this conversation recently with somebody where it's like, it's so different when you approach the thing that you love the most by just saying, I do that thing. And I think that maybe we've talked about this before, like the power of wanting to be an artist and calling myself an artist were like a huge void between the two things. Like they were too far apart. And you can't be one without calling yourself one. You can't do it unless you believe you already are, you know? And so like an artist is more of a state of being, not a title that you obtain. And so I just decided one day in my own exploration of trying to find that inner child and that inner, I guess, exile, as you might say, right? We're thinking about it. All new to me, just heard it, so I'm just trying to apply it. And who always wanted to be this specific type of thing in life and create and do this stuff, not because of, what other people think about it, but just to make it because I love it and then put it out there and see what happens. And I don't think I ever really did that. And so, life for me right now looks different, to kind of come back around to your question, because I'm also incorporating the main thing that I've always completely wanted to do and do my way. I never had the guts to do and call myself an artist and be able to do it until now. And so, building a family while also trying to pursue a dream in your own way is a challenge that I wasn't really ready for in many ways, but am embracing and trying to adapt. And so, yeah, we're kind of, I think, at a big transition right now. So I don't really know Don't really know what it is, because right now, I mean, we still rent. We don't have any kind of roots anywhere except for in the city generally. So it's hard for me to imagine it. I guess I'm kind of open to it right now. But I think the main thing that I want to build is a place and a home and a family where I get to the place my dad is now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I want to be more sensitive to other people and more loving, and have to where if I do accidentally have a child, then I will be able to
Accidents happen, Cody.
they do. I always say it's the only way it's going to happen. But
Whoops.
the fact that I can't imagine why you'd be saying it like that is what makes it so funny. Like, my brain's going through all these like awful examples. I don't want to be thinking about that. But anyway, that they would have a very different experience, and it's like it's always your hope that you can not pass on the things that you've carried on from your family, your parents and their parents and the parents before them, and try to improve on those things and find better ways to parent and better ways to provide, and that providing doesn't always just mean the food on the table, And I think that we're equipped for that, and already in many ways, generally, but trying to find that thing for me and trying to see what that looks like in my own house and my own place, and try to imagine that, and just, yeah, I'd like to be that person. And I think, and I feel like my brother's in many ways that way, because he jumped ahead of me on the kid train and just had one. So, he's experiencing his own version of that and where he is. And so it's kind of a fun way to see that that's our family dynamic changing the way it is. And we all live so far apart now. And so that's kind of a strange thing, because then now we're more connected than we've ever been, kind of because we have to if we want to stay in touch. And so, for the first time in my entire life, like, I talk to my parents every day.
Wow.
Every single day. And it's almost always a 30-minute conversation, but can sometimes be longer depending on how long I'm on the road. So I just call them when I get in the car.
Yeah.
See what they're doing. And a lot of times I'm like heading up to our warehouse. It's like 45 minutes away, so I'll just talk to them the whole way there.
Huh.
But yeah, it's kind of weird. They call me the good son now because I call every day. Lately, my brother's been calling every day from Austria, though.
How the tables have turned.
Man, that's true. I don't know. I don't have him a kid yet, so I don't know how much of the favorite I can be. But yeah, it's definitely a growing experience. But I almost think that, like, from the place we are now, it's almost easier to look back and see. I would rather be looking back and seeing those things that my parents affected in me negatively, even, or more specifically, now than before, when it was maybe still fresh, or I had a not great relationship with my parents, because I know that I can look back on those things and it doesn't really affect my relationship with them because of the fact that I see them. And also, should probably just say this as like a disclaimer that, like, I also did not have a bad childhood growing up at all. And, like, it's easy for me to say this because I have a good relationship with my family that wasn't fully damaged by trauma and all that stuff. But, like, for me, it's been really nice because, like, my parents didn't do that much, right? Like, they did, like, normal ass shit that like parents will do that just they don't think about, and it affects their children in negative ways. But it wasn't like traumatic or anything. I think that's something that I'm pretty thankful for. The trauma in my life happened later, and so I did have a fine childhood that I don't have any big problems with. But it's like teen years and all of that, that stressing of the relationship starting to grow between you and your parents, that was probably the more traumatic time for me with my family. But you grow, move on.
So I grew up as an only child. I was a latchkey child as well. So at the time when I grew up, there weren't as many divorces in the United States, and my mom was a single parent. She and my father had divorced when I was really young, or separated when I was really young, and really from the age of about 6 or 7, I more or less was the person who took care of myself. I obeyed my mom. She said, make sure you stay safe, and I pretty much did. I'd go from school, and then I'd go to the library and stay at the library for a couple of hours. Then I'd go home and meet Mom for dinner. She had a job where she had to work nights. So, after I had dinner, she took me into bed. We talked a little bit about the day, and then she would go to work, and she would tell me the secret code before when we had the phone. So if she had to call me, I knew when it was her. But I lived a lot in my own little world. I was very much an introvert. So I enjoyed creating things on my own, learning things on my own. I had my full set of encyclopedias. We had a great bookshelf of so many neat things. And of course, this was all before the internet. So everything I did, I pretty much found the options and did it on my own. I loved reading science fiction and fantasy books, mostly science fiction. But I don't know, unless we visited my relatives who were out of state, I pretty much had it on my own. Now, right now, I'm also out of state still. I am not as close with my family, and I think it just is because it worked out that way. Sometimes I miss them, and sometimes I don't.
When Amy and I first started having kids, the type of parent that I was definitely very different than
Sure.
the type of parent I am now.
Yeah, definitely.
And when I'm thinking about the kind of family dynamic that I want to have now with my kids, and I look back on where I came from, I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is helping my kids feel safe and connected. And especially for my oldest, with, like I said, he and I have kind of similar nervous system sensitivities, and I'm realizing he treats his siblings in very similar ways. He's actually much better to his siblings than I was to my siblings.
Oh, yeah.
I was terrible to my siblings. But I think part of that is helping him feel supported, and at the same time, like, helping him understand the value and the worth of his siblings, and helping all of them learn how to set boundaries and respect other people's boundaries and things like that.
Yeah.
But because I think what my oldest is going through is so similar to a lot of the stuff that, like, my own responses. My big thing right now, my big focus is helping him feel safe, because he will wake up in the middle of the night with, like, night terrors, and he currently can't be in a room by himself, and so he just has a lot of anxieties, and then his imagination goes crazy at night and thinking like everything's moving and just all this stuff. But
Wow.
It got really bad. I started sleeping in with Amy and the kids again this summer, and I didn't realize, Amy had been dealing with this the whole time.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how bad it was. But he started waking up in the middle of the night, and, like, he has to be in bed with a parent. And there was no room.
Right.
And so he would try to wedge himself in, and then, like, that was getting frustrating. So then I would make him go back to bed, and he would start to get up, and I would start to get angry again. And just, I wasn't, like, super harsh with him. I'm just like, go back to bed,
Right.
just very
Yeah.
firm. And then he just kept getting worse. And I was building up this thing, like, it was amplifying his anxiety, because then he felt like he couldn't reach out about it, and he had no one to help him.
Right.
And then he risked, like, making me angry if he got up and said something. But, like, so he was just, like, spiraling.
Yeah.
And so we rearranged the sleeping situation to where I slept next to him on my mattress, next to his mattress. And at first, I still had to get in his bed. But then over the course of a couple of weeks, I got to where I could just hold him with my arm off the bed, and then put my foot out at the bottom where he can touch his feet, because he'll, like, curl up in a ball. But when I put my foot down there, he can actually stretch out and, like, relax and feel safe to do that. And he just, like, lets out this huge sigh of relief. And I'm realizing how much anxiety he's been experiencing, and kind of suffering silently a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And also not silently.
Yeah.
But the thing that, like, was amazing was when he started asking me in the middle of the night, I would tell him, you're okay. You can wake me up anytime if you need me. I just want to help you feel safe.
Right.
And so he would start, asking me to cuddle him and stuff like that. But then he stopped asking that, and he'll wake up and say, "Daddy, will you help me feel safe?" And we've been like restoring that trust and that bond and that connection just by something simple like me sticking my leg out so he can touch it with his foot while he's sleeping.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult as a parent to find that balance. And I don't even think balance is the right word for it. It's more of a dance.
Yeah.
Because, I have passions and I have, goals I want to achieve, and I have things I want to do, and, things I want to create.
Yeah.
And I have a full-time job, and I have a wife, and I have 3 little ones. And I often feel like I'm failing, but the dynamic that I am, one step at a time working to create is one where even in those seasons when things can get busy, I can maintain an awareness of their attention and needs. And even if it's just a couple of minutes, when they ask me to look at a book with them, or when they ask me to play, I say yes every time that's feasible, and I sit down, even if it's just for a little bit of time, just so that they know that they're no longer conditioning themselves for me to say no to their requests, but they're conditioning themselves for me to say yes. And I want to, and my hope for them in all of this is that it fosters a continuation of their curiosity, their playfulness, their creativity, their passion, and their courage,
Yeah.
And I am okay with whatever happens after that,
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's kind of like, it's the difference of how, your environment when you were growing up was fostering all of the less healthy versions of an Enneagram 5, right? And whereas you're trying to tap into, Enneagram 5s can be incredibly creative and innovative and all these things. You can't tap into the source of where your passion and the positive work that can be done in your life, whether it's like actual work, like working, or your passions or whatever hobbies, without being in a better place. And I don't think that there's a certain point, I feel like, in all of our lives that, me and you and everybody listening as 5s, where we have to like come to grips with that reality that like, you can't just keep being the way that you've always been, because it doesn't actually it's not as efficient or productive as you think it is in your life.
Yeah.
And, I spent so much of my life, maybe because of my family and that dynamic that we grew up with, where I thought that I had to have my own me time and that solitude, that isolation away from everybody and everything to get like the best work done. It's like that myth of songwriting, right? Where it's like, oh, you have to like really hone in and decide on how you want to be, and like all these ways of writing and all that stuff before you can write that one good song. And it's like, no, you just keep doing it and over and over again, and write all the bad songs first. You'll get there. And that's not, and also like being out, reading books, being around people, listening to other people's stories, doing the things that is the exact opposite of the isolation I thought I needed, actually produces better art and produces better creativity out of me, because you get
actually
inspired.
experiencing life.
You're experiencing life, and life is inspiring. Yeah. So it's like, I think that's kind of what I was trying to get to, is like, if I have kids, that would be the kind of parent I want to be, is to foster those things and do the things that I didn't necessarily feel that I had, because my parents didn't have those tools. They didn't have that knowledge. They had parents that came out of the Depression, and it was a survival mode for the last 3 generations of people, right? So it's like we're the first generation that came into this world where we didn't have to be in survival mode if we didn't want to be, and our parents worked extra hard because of their parents coming out of that era and had more money typically in the boomer age. So it's like, I don't know, it's such an interesting place that we get to be in, both as the age we are in and the generation that we're all in right now, and also 5s, because we have a unique perspective to bring to that I think only comes out of that growth that you experience through like re-examining those family dynamics and how they impacted you, and choosing to take steps to grow instead of just keep sitting in that and passing it on, keeping those dynamics a cycle, Yeah, it becomes a lot more exciting to see what you're going to do with it, I feel like. and how it can change and adapt.
Yeah, I think cycle was the good word there, because when I said earlier that the work that I'm doing is spiritual,
right?
I mean that in so many ways, and one of the ways is I'm the circuit breaker.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have kids, by interrupting those patterns and stopping the cycle, you're also still impacting the people that come into your life, regardless of whether or not, they're your family.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're still passing on new patterns and new ways of being that don't have to reflect the way the programming that you were handed,
Right.
And for me, that is the work. And I think that family dynamics, or Josiah's hair, whatever we want to call this episode, the whole purpose of the conversation is to just sort of understand where we came from and all of those parts of us and how they contribute to who we are, and figuring out how to bring those parts together to be our truest self.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, we wanted to have this conversation because you as a listener, if you haven't thought about these things, just bringing it up to help you think about it a little bit. Because I feel like the first step, once you start going down that road, just like I did in this episode, when you start going down that road, you start thinking about all those things and immediately getting to examine them and hopefully find grace in that situation and some forgiveness behind it, or not, and get through that in a different way through trauma therapy. But either way, it's the first steps to getting to that place and to moving on and be able to get into a healthier place mentally and emotionally, to be able to process those things and break that cycle.
And if you are fortunate enough to have any parents and siblings still alive that you can contact, just give them a ring.
Yeah,
and
give them a ring.
Let them know that you appreciate them.
Yes.
And that you're thinking of them. And I think this was a good reminder that we are not an island, and that we are deeply connected to other lives and in our families and elsewhere, and the generations that came before that.
Yeah, it's all an illusion. You're not an island. You just dug a moat.
And that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. See you next time.
Hey, it's Josiah, and I wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you're the type of person who likes helping others, would you do us a favor and share it with other people like you? If you found value in this conversation, they will too. I also want to give a special thanks to our community members who shared their voice with us in this episode. If anything in this conversation has resonated with you, or if you have any further thoughts or questions, I want to invite you to join our community of other people like you and continue the conversation at Enneagram5.com.